people would refuse to rope up with me. And they would say to my face, I don't want to rope up with you. You're a girl. I don't think you can hold my fall. And then they would usually say something which they didn't seem to have a problem with, but I found it to be a bit sexist or patronizing when they say, I'm into the women's lib stuff and all, but. And then it'd be, I'm not roping up with you. I don't think you can hold my fall. And this is me. This is my safety. That's like a big deal. And that was it.
This is Confluence Radio, the podcast about how we impact and interact with nature. I'm your host, Dave Schmidt. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking with two women in the outdoor profession and their experiences dealing with gender biases in the outdoors, as well as why it's important to try to get more women involved in the outdoors.
So my name is Deb Iango. I've been in outdoor education, I'd have to add up the years, 30-some years. And right now I focus mainly on risk management, safety.
Now, in those 30 or so years, Deb has gained a lot of experience. She has experience guiding and teaching. Anywhere from an introduction to,
introducing people to the outdoors who'd never done anything to the outdoors. But I also did a lot of high altitude mountaineering. So McKinley or Aconcagua, Arctic survival, a lot of glacier travel, crevasse rescue stuff, the full gamut.
Now, as you can tell, Deb has a wide range of experience working in the outdoors, and she's seen and done a lot in all her years. But I also wanted to speak to someone who's just getting her start in the outdoor profession and get her insight as well.
So primarily, I was an intern, and there was another intern from a Juneau school. So her and I primarily worked in town, kind of helping the in-town staff coordinate the trips and helping with food, directing clients, teaching clients in town.
That's Becca Erdman. Becca is an undergraduate student at Alaska Pacific University in Anchorage, Alaska. Last summer, she took an internship working for a company that, among many other things, teaches mountaineering skills on Denali, the highest peak in North America.
So clients would come in, fly in from all over the world, all over the country, and basically some would come in depending on the trip they were going on with a lot of knowledge and were ready to go, and some would come in if they were coming in for a course with a very little baseline. So basically what we did in town was give everyone this baseline lesson in knots and fixed line ascension and just various mountaineering skills that they would need. And so the intern and I, the other intern and I were basically there to help the guides teach those skills because it was a very busy time when everyone's packing.
So when it comes to men's and women's participation in outdoor activities, overall, the breakdown is pretty even. You see some differences depending on what age group and activity you look at, but generally the differences are only about 5 to 10% one way or the other. However, you start to see some of the stark differences when you look at professional participation like guiding and teaching, as well as clients that are paying to be guided, especially when those activities are higher risk like mountaineering, or when you look at the other end of the spectrum with introductory courses, a point that is echoed by both Becca and Deb.
So it was definitely mainly men. So the business is owned by a couple, a husband and a wife, and on the administrative side, it's definitely equal, men and women. But where the guiding comes in is where I saw the huge disparity between the genders. This summer, there was 1 or 2 full-time female guides, and I, depending on their busy season, anywhere from 30 to 40 male guides. So that's really where I saw the big disparity start to happen.
And what about the clients?
For the Denali trips, I would say mainly men. There is a high percentage of the trips that were only men, and then when there would be women, it would be 1 or 2 women. But then one thing I thought was interesting was the courses, where it's beginners / people who don't even know anything about mountaineering come in. I saw a much more equal balance between the genders, which was kind of cool. At the elite level of climbing Denali, there's all these men, but then there's still this interest in the courses and learning these skills from both genders, which I thought that was cool.
Getting into the gender stuff, there's a significant difference in male-female participation depending on how hardcore it is. I mean, I did McKinley 8 trips, and there were 3 women.
That whole time?
In 8 years, and there were 3 women.
Wow.
Right? So it was super male heavy. I was the only woman guide, and basically climbing McKinley with our company at that point. I rarely saw women on the mountain. Well, or if it's intro, beginning, it's almost all women.
So being the only woman at times, or one of very few women, either teaching or guiding, did you ever feel like you were treated any differently because you're a woman?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, almost my whole career was.
I never felt that I was treated differently by my coworkers, but where I did feel some discrimination was from clients. Definitely older male clients. I'm not trying to be sexist, but that's just how it is.
And in what ways were you treated differently?
Trying to teach them skills at the headquarters, they would just be doing it wrong because they're learning, and the other intern and I would try and oh, hey, try this technique for the figure 8. It helps a lot, and just blank stare, not even listen, and just go right back to doing it wrong. It was just little things that I could tell their male guide had much more influence over them versus this little girl that's trying to help them out.
People would refuse to rope up with me. And they would say to my face, I don't want to rope up with you. You're a girl. I don't think you can hold my fall. And then they would usually say something which they didn't see. They didn't seem to have a problem with. But I found it to be a bit sexist or patronizing when they say, I'm into the women's lib stuff and all, but. And then it'd be, I'm not roping up with you. I don't think you can hold my fall. And this is me. This is my safety. That's a big deal. And that was it.
And like Becca, Deb also had her share of experience dealing with discrimination while trying to teach clients or students.
I mean, I would be teaching because we're doing if it's some sort of a mountaineering or whatever, let's say you and I are working together and it's your time off. You're eating lunch, but I'm teaching. So I might be teaching snow anchors or mechanical advantage. And so the men are standing around me, and I'm explaining something, and one of them would have a question, and they would turn to the man, the other guide, who's having lunch, and they would ask him the question, even though I'm teaching the class, and he's standing right in front of me, and obviously he didn't think I could answer the question, and so that's more of they question my competency, as a professional.
And then some of it was more overt, where Emma is the other intern. We were teaching. That's where a lot of it came into. We're listening to us, and the guides would speak up and be like, "Hey, they're trying to help you. Listen to them." So there was definitely some times where it was very overt that they were choosing not to listen to us. Yeah. So it was an interesting summer when I would think about and read articles or books about this topic. It was just interesting that I was kind of living all these different experiences, and I didn't quite know where everyone was coming from, or if it was because I was a girl, or if it was just because I'm really young. So it was hard to tell.
In the beginning of her career, Deb said that being young and being a woman was definitely a factor in some of the different treatment she received, and a lot of men didn't think that she was strong enough or competent enough as an instructor or guide. Deb, did you ever feel that you had to work harder than your male counterparts to overcome this assumption?
Well, I sure did to start. And I think that that's probably pretty common for women early in their career, right? A lot of it has to do with kind of confidence, knowing your place, being comfortable with who you are, your career as a guide. The first few times that I climbed McKinley, or the first few times that I, led all male trips, I felt the need to prove myself. And then I would carry brutal loads. And if a guy asked, here, could I carry that? Or because they were, again, is it being polite? Is it being chauvinist? I'm not sure, but they would assume I couldn't carry a heavy load. So they'd say, oh, here, I'll carry that. And then they would actually try to carry more. And my first response was, no, I can't let that happen, because that will actually undermine my authority. So I would say, no, no, no. And then I would carry a heavier load. So I would very commonly carry a load heavier than the men. And they would see through time, that I could do it. After you get a little more confident, you realize that that's pretty stupid. It's like, why am I doing this? And I mean, towards the end of my career, especially on a big mountain, if a guy down low says, "Here, can I carry your load?" And I'm like, "Sure, here you go," because I figure we're not talking a 2 or 3 day trip. I mean, this is going to be a 2 or 3 week trip. In McKinley, a lot of times it's 24 days, and I knew that within a week they weren't going to be able to carry the load, and I was going to get it back anyway. And so it's like I had nothing to prove. At first I felt like I had to prove myself, and then I felt like, nope, I knew it would be okay. I didn't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. So you had mentioned to me that on several occasions clients would approach you after a trip and shake your hand and tell you that you would surprise them at how well you did and how strong you were or whatever, and that you had really proved yourself. And I'm sure most, if not all of them, were being sincere and trying to pay you a compliment, but did you ever find that offensive or frustrating that the attitudes of people at the beginning of trips were such that you even needed to prove yourself?
Again, at first, the first couple trips is like I found it highly offensive. I didn't say anything. I bit my tongue, but you just get used to it.
Did you ever feel that the different treatment you experienced or the different attitudes towards you as a woman were malicious, or I don't know, do you think people even realized they were doing it?
I mean, I actually think a lot of it is just what you grow up with. They just never seen it before. And I think we have a lot of gender and racial bias, not just in our country, but in the world. It's an example is I used to work in the ER, and there's a lot of male nurses, and a lot of men and women have a hard time with that, because they're just not used to it. And I think the same thing is true with whether it's women mountaineers or women raft guides or women driving caterpillars, big machinery. You're just not used to it. Once you get used to it, it's not that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. For me, I was pretty early in the stages of women guiding on McKinley or guiding a big mountain. And I think so many men just weren't used to that. Whereas now, when you see, there's world-class women skiers and climbers, and it's in the news, and so and they're like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. There's definitely some folks who they recognize that women can do that, but then when it comes to their own safety, they're like, well, that's cool and all, but I still don't want to be on your rope.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the outdoor industry is more inclusive now of women than it has been over the last few decades?
I think it is more inclusive of other genders. When I was in the field and did see other personal trips, climbing or learning, I did see more of a equal spread of genders. Like there was just as many women in little expedition groups as men. And I think where it really is lagging behind is in the professional side of the industry. I think that we've been trying really hard to include genders and races and that in the personal aspects of the outdoors, and I think women are getting out there for themselves. It's just more of the professional side where I think we have some more steps to take.
I'm impressed with how much it's changed in one generation, but I think a lot of it has to do with like the internet, YouTube, because if you don't see it, right, then you're not going to learn about it. Whereas nowadays, the extreme sports are so popular, and when you can see some of these women doing, pretty extreme lines for skiing, or some of the rock climbers, the free climbers, now you can see what they can do. So then it's a lot easier for guys to get that exposure and to go, oh wow, women can do this too.
Now, when I asked why it's so important to strive for equality in the outdoors, Deb had echoed a sentiment that has been argued by many people, many naturalists, over the years, and that's this idea of nature as a proving ground, as a venue to test oneself and seek self-improvement through the challenge that outdoor activities provide.
When people ask me, like a lot of folks, my family included, they just don't understand, why would you ever want to climb McKinley? And for me, it actually has nothing to do with summiting. It has to do with like my progression as a guide was there's this thing out there that's a little bigger than I am. And it's just way beyond what because growing up in the farm field of Wisconsin, it's just like, wow. And I wonder if I could do that. You put it out there and you work for it and you do it and you succeed. And then that develops confidence, right? And then you also, there almost always something happened on the trip where I wasn't having fun. And there's a little voice in me that wanted to quit. The weather sucked. It was cold. The load was heavy. And I thought, oh, God. And you want to quit, but you didn't. And then you were so thankful, right? Because ultimately, it ended up being great. And that's life, right? It's my marriage. It's my job. And it's like you always are going to run into something it just kind of sucks. And you feel like quitting. And it's like, don't quit. If you stick it through, I felt it was very gratifying. From here on out, it's like whenever I've had something tough in life come in front of me, it's like, just keep that in mind. It's like I can get through anything. It's like I've been here before. Life has sucked. It's hurt. And you just push through and you will succeed. And that's what I'm trying to teach my nieces right now. Right. And so I think that for a lot of young women, that lesson right there can be accomplished. The outdoors is almost a perfect classroom for that.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. And I think that's a perfect example of why it's important to get women involved in the outdoors. Another thing that I heard about why it's important to get more women outdoors from both Becca and Deb is this idea of civic involvement and the protection of natural spaces. Because when people develop a love for places, they have a vested interest to want to protect those places.
It's super important to have gender equality in the outdoor industry because it is a really young industry that has a great future. We're getting more and more involved in things like government and fighting for land to be set aside.
I think that's super important for just the environment in general, right? And I mean, you know me, but I'm a firm believer in we have to get our youth to do it, right? We have to get people into the wilderness. We have to get, whether it's female, men, to understand its value, to participate in it if they're going to fight for it, right? Otherwise, it's going to go away. And so I think that's huge.
So what advice would you give to women who are just getting started in the outdoors or maybe want to get started in the outdoors?
I would say to young girls, find a friend group, find a group that encourages you to try new things, whether it's in high school, some high schools have groups, or once you even get into college, like a place like APU. I felt so lucky that I had this experience being here when I went into this summer because I did have the confidence that other men have accepted me, other women have accepted me in this field. And I did have the confidence to go out and perform the skills where I feel like if I hadn't have had this background here at APU of being so accepted in this field, that this summer might have been a little more challenging just because I kind of had to stand on my own. So I would encourage young girls to just first off, go outside and do what you love to do. Find a friend group that loves to do the same things and just keep on doing it, and practice will go a long ways, and find mentors to look to.
And like Becca, Deb stresses the importance of having a supportive group to help in one's early stages of involvement in the outdoors.
And so find friends, groups, meetup groups, take classes. But when it comes to learning the skills initially, take responsibility for doing it. And if you can find some sort of a supportive group to learn through, I think that that's a good way to get going.
And aside from the advice to find a supportive group, Deb has some additional advice for women, which may seem a little harsh at first, but I think she brings up a valid point.
So I don't know, you're going to want to put this on your podcast. Don't learn from your boyfriend. That's not a good way to do it. I would encourage you to find a more supportive group. And that's another thing where I hope this doesn't come across as like I'm sexist.
And she goes on to clarify and talks about a course that she used to teach that was a basic introduction to camping, how to light a camp stove, set up a tent, basic map and compass skills, that sort of thing. And it was a class that was open to both men and women, but she said that for the most part, there were never any men. It was almost always all women.
And all of those women would come. We would have a blast. They were so thankful that they had a female instructor. And it was usually a male and a female. And they would give me the stories about how their boyfriends weren't good teachers and they ridiculed them. And if they struggled, the boyfriends would say, oh, here, let me do it. And then they'd take the stove away and light it for them or take the tent away. And they never learned.
And I think that's a really good lead in to my next question, which is, what do you think the role of men is in helping to foster more equality in the outdoors? And if I can offer my input in light of Deb's comments, I think that is something that we as men could probably do a better job of, is understand that not everyone has the same familiarity or comfort level performing certain tasks, and that, everyone starts somewhere. So if you're trying to teach outdoor skills to your girlfriend, niece, sister, whomever, be supportive and non-judgmental and encourage them to take an active role in the development of their outdoor skills. So, Becca, what do you think is the role of men in helping to foster more equality in the outdoors?
Just be encouraging and be there for younger women maybe trying to get into this field. And if you do see someone making remarks or discriminating against a woman, step up and just say, like, hey, you don't know what they can do. Like, wait till you see what they can do.
So I want to offer a sincere thank you to Becca and Deb for taking their time to sit down with me and share their experiences and offer their insight. And I want to leave you with a story that Deb told me about a brief encounter she had while hiking. And Deb was on her way to meet up with a field course that was on the Harding Ice Field in south central Alaska. She was meeting up with them to perform a safety audit. The course was already in the field, and Deb was traveling solo to catch up with them before they headed out.
So I had to get up pretty early because I had to catch up to the group. They were camped right on the ice, and they were going to go out on the ice field. And so I had to travel solo very quickly, right? So I had to be fit. I had to make sure nothing went wrong because I had no backup plan, and get out on the ice before they finished breakfast. And so, gorgeous day, and I am traveling at a pretty good pace. And I felt pretty fit. Like, this was pretty cool, beautiful sunrise. And I was pretty high up, and somebody comes over the top. So pretty surprising, like, whoa, look, the person in front of me. And it's only like 7 a.m. And it was a woman of maybe 70. And I'm shocked, right? And she's traveling solo, and she's fit, and she's got a backpack. And it's like, holy cow, what's a woman of 70? Because, that's my mother's generation, right? And so then you're like, wow. And she's competent. You can tell she's done this a lot. And I think the look of recognition on both of our faces, and I don't know this for sure because we really didn't talk. And I thought, as soon as I saw her, I thought, you are the reason I'm here. If she had not done what she did, she opened the door for me. Right. And I know that because it was kind of hard for me because I had so much sexism when I was, at that starting of my career. But it was because of her. Right. She made it possible. And I think her look was, you're exactly what I was hoping would happen. And we just had a look of acknowledgement and just smiled. And it's like, hey, how's it going? And it's like, beautiful day, isn't it? And that was about it. And she descended and I continued on. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that that's what we were both thinking. And that was just a pretty cool experience.
I also wanted to say thank you to you all, the listeners, and I want to hear from you. Drop us a line at facebook.com/Confluence Radio and Twitter @Confluence Radio, and tell me what you liked, what you think could use improvement. I want to strive to make the best podcast I can for you all, and that won't be possible without your valued feedback. And while you're on Facebook and Twitter, be sure to like and follow Confluence Radio to stay up to date on new episodes. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, and new episodes will appear automatically in your feed. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.